They want to punish and push back Hezbollah to prevent them from continuing their attacks on northern Israel. Now, this is a moment that it's hard to describe. This was a giant figure, Hassan Nasrallah, not just here in Lebanon, where he led the most powerful political and military force in the country. He also led the most potent opposition to Israel in the entire Middle East, the biggest beneficiary of Iranian largesse, the leader of the so-called Axis of Resistance of Iranian-allied militant groups, and he really cut a profile throughout the entire world that was not unlike, say, a Che Guevara. He was more of the lodestar for all of these different groups, leftist organizations, anti-colonial groups, groups who were anti-Western throughout the entire world. You could see his face in places like Latin America among left-wing political parties. This is a man whose stature rose well beyond this tiny country of Lebanon, and his death is going to send shockwaves not just throughout the Middle East, but throughout the entire world. It's also going to set off a succession, well, not necessarily crisis, but a succession question within Hezbollah. Who is going to take the reins of this organization, particularly now, after so many of its top leaders have been killed in the last week of Israeli airstrikes and in the week before that really unusual attack that Israel used, bombing pagers and walkie-talkies that named thousands of the group's commandos. Literally, Israel has sheared the trigger fingers off of the fighters who they would be facing off against if and when they decide to launch a ground invasion. Now, that question of an Israeli ground invasion is still very much an open one because, like I said, it doesn't sound as though Israel is totally satisfied with the killing of Hassan Nasrallah. They're still continuing to attack targets with airstrikes throughout Lebanon, and they had, just a couple of days ago, really implied that they were about to launch a ground invasion into southern Lebanon. What that would look like, where it would go, how strong it would be, these are all open questions, and whether or not they're even going to continue to do it, we don't know. Also, we don't know Hezbollah's reaction, whether this group, this formidable force, is going to sit back and lick its wounds for a moment at least, whether this could push them to some sort of negotiations with Israel, to come to some sort of peace deal, the kind that was offered up by many different Western and Arab powers in just the past couple of days. That could happen. Especially since this group has now been effectively decapitated and many of its military capabilities have been set back. But the fact is, we know that Hezbollah has a lot of very powerful weapons that they've kept in reserve so far. Tactical missiles that could be used to strike even deeper into Israel. The Israelis have, with great effect, swatted down some of those most sophisticated weapons using their air defense systems. And if they were to try to deploy them now, the Israelis would not only be able to shoot them down, but they might be able to locate exactly where they're located and strike against them as well. But these are a lot of open questions because just in the last hour, we've gotten confirmation from Hezbollah that Hassan Nasrallah has been killed. We don't know where this is going to head, but this is an incredibly, it's hard to overstate, an incredibly volatile moment for this very volatile region. Guys.
Matt, before we let you go, you just spoke to the escalating tensions. This is the latest escalation in the region. What does this mean for that 21-day ceasefire deal that the United States and other allies had put on the table? This was a ceasefire deal calling for 21 days of no fighting along the Israel-Lebanon border. And this would potentially allow residents who have been displaced, who live along that border in Israel, to return to the area. Does this mean that this is essentially off the table for now?
Well, we don't really know. The fact of the matter is that it was the Israelis who torpedoed that offer. Benjamin Netanyahu had kind of agreed to it, it sounds like, according to reports, right when it was offered. And then it was the following morning that his right-wing political allies, who basically make up his very right-wing cabinet, said that they would withdraw their support for the cabinet, withdraw their participation, and all but collapse the entire government if he were to accede to that deal. So now it's still the Israelis who are holding out. It's still the Israelis who will determine the fate of that 21-day ceasefire. So we still have to hear from them. The killing of Hassan Nasrallah, it sounds as though Hezbollah might have actually been on board even before this happened. That would have been an opportunity for them, a moment for them to stop and possibly even rearm. Now that opportunity could be lost because the Israelis said that they weren't going to accede to some sort of 21-day ceasefire deal, just as it was the Israelis who have been blocking a deal in the Gaza Strip for much of the past several weeks. So what we have from here on out, it's hard to see if the Israelis are going to decide that they're not going to be attacking. They're continuing to attack, even though they've gotten the main prize, Hassan Nasrallah, who for more than 30 years has led their primary antagonist in the Middle East. Guys.
MSNBC's Matt Bradley, live in Beirut. Thank you very much. Joining the conversation now is former Arab-Israeli negotiator Aaron David Miller. He is a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.
Aaron David Miller, for those who are just waking up to this news, what does this development mean for the region writ large? And specifically, how does this inform Iran's posture?
I hate the word game changer and inflection point. Life's really not about transformations. It's usually about smaller transactions, which could lead to important, significant developments. But I think right now, for any number of reasons, we really are on the cusp of two broad choices. And those choices depend on three things. Number one, how and in what way will Hezbollah respond? Yes, Hassan Nasrallah is dead. Yes, the Israelis have destroyed their comms communication. They've killed hundreds of fighters, including senior commanders. They're on the verge of setting back their weapons emplacements in and around Beirut. Hezbollah is an organization. It represents an idea. It still has agency. So the first question is, how are they going to respond? Second, what is Iran's calculation? Are they now prepared to understand that Nasrallah has put the entire resistance project in the dock by tethering himself to a ceasefire in Gaza and supporting Yahya Sinwar? And then third, the Israeli calculation. Is this an effort by the Israelis to use force in order to get a diplomatic settlement, or is this a more open campaign to find a way to permanently destroy most of Hezbollah's assets in Lebanon, which would mean clearly a full-scale war? So none of these things are decided right now. But nonetheless, on one hand, you have the prospects of a diplomatic pathway if the answers to these questions go in one direction. On the other, you have the real potential of something the Middle East has never experienced before, which is a multi-front war, which would start with a massive escalation between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. You'd have pro-Iranian militias striking American targets and forces in Iraq and Syria. The Houthis would step up their attacks, and ultimately you'd end up with an direct Israeli-Iranian confrontation, which could easily draw in the United States. That's where we are. I wish I could make a prediction about where we're going, but simply too much uncertainty, Simone.
You know, this week, the UN General Assembly, UNGA, was taking place here in New York City. And Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel gave a very fiery, some would have described it as hawkish speech. I want to play for you what he had to say specifically about Hezbollah and the Israelis' actions. Take a listen.
I said to the people of Lebanon this week, get out of the death trap that Hezbollah has put you in. Don't let Nasrallah drag Lebanon into the abyss. We're not at war with you. We're at war with Hezbollah, which has hijacked your country and threatens to destroy ours. As long as Hezbollah chooses the path of war, Israel has no choice, and Israel has every right to remove this threat and return our citizens to their homes safely.
If Prime Minister Netanyahu believes that Israel has no choice here, Aaron, what does that mean for the potential, if you will, for that 21-day ceasefire deal, the potential for tensions and the escalation to be taken down a notch? Because this does seem like a very precarious moment for the region.
Look, I think the Israelis, and led by the IDF, and with the concurrence of the prime minister, concluded that Hamas, as an organized military force in Gaza, is finished. The Israelis are not fighting a two-front war anymore. It's a one-front war. And it's what the IDF believes is the strategic challenge of trying to figure out a way to not just to return their citizens to the northern border, but to create a situation where southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River, is essentially free of Hezbollah's ground forces, which could easily mount an incursion across the border, and its missiles. And that is going to require, in the end, a diplomatic pathway out of here. There's no way in 3 weeks, Simone, that any Israeli resident is going to be able to return to northern Israel. We're talking here about a semi-permanent sort of arrangement in which UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which is not implemented after the last Israeli-Hezbollah war in the summer of 2006, would simply compel Hezbollah to go north of Litani, bring in the Lebanese armed forces, a multinational force, UNIFIL, would be solidified in an effort to monitor that area. We are so far away from that. The key to watch now, I really believe, is how Hezbollah is going to process this. Are they going to respond with their precision-guided missiles, which could reach Israeli population centers and destroy key pieces of Israeli infrastructure, including the electricity grid and water desal plants? Or under Iran's urging, is Hezbollah going to step back and consider seriously the prospects of diplomatic pathway? We simply can't answer that question, but Israeli policy and presumably American policy will depend on the answer to that specific question, and we simply don't know it yet.
Aaron David Miller, thank you so much for your insights this morning. Next, we turn to domestic breaking news from the campaign trail. There are new details from Team Harris about their plans after this week's VP debate. Principal Deputy Campaign Manager Quentin Fulks will join us after the break to discuss. This is The Weekend on MSNBC.
Introducing Allison's Black Psoriasis. She thinks her flaky gray patches are all people see.
Otezla is the #1 prescribed pill to treat plaque psoriasis. Over here. Otezla can help you get clearer skin and reduce itching and flaking with no routine blood tests required. Doctors have been prescribing Otezla for over a decade. Otezla is also approved to treat psoriatic arthritis. Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Serious allergic reactions can happen. Otezla may cause severe diarrhea, nausea, or vomiting. Some people taking Otezla have depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss. Upper respiratory tract infection and headache may occur.
With clear skin, Girls' Day Out is a good day out. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla.
At Avocado, how you sleep matters. Whether you crave indulgent luxury, a naturally cool night's sleep, ergonomic back support, or all of the above, sleep is never a one-size-fits-all at Avocado. And because your health and our planet is what matters most to us, Avocado's certified organic mattresses are made with natural and renewable materials. Discover why Avocado is one of the highest-rated mattresses in America. Visit our stores or your local retailer or shop online at avocadomattress.com.
I started experiencing hair loss on the edges specifically.
My part was extra thin, and then that's when I found Hers.
Through Hers, you can regrow thicker, fuller hair with a range of doctor-trusted treatments, including serums, chews, and pills, formulated with prescription ingredients and high-grade supplements.
I've started to feel more confident.
I tell all of my friends about Hers.
Regrow hair in as few as 3 to 6 months. Get started today at forhers.com.
At Bombas, we dream of